Nicholas, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. After actually exploring your most recent book, Leading in Chaos, recently, and being aware of your work, I'm really intrigued to see where this conversation goes today.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a real pleasure to be here.
So, as you are aware, we jumped straight in with, is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
Wow. Is there a question I'm exploring? Um, what does it mean to be fully human and fully in touch with the divine? And to be living as a force of healing and awakening in the world, which I feel is my deepest calling and always has been. And yeah, what is the highest purpose and the highest potential of being human? The small issues like that.
Oh, just those things. Okay.
The ones that arise just now.
But this is so many of those questions, even individually, brought a bit of a delight to me there when you said them. But even the idea of does it mean to be fully human, and then almost this addition of it, and to be in touch with the divine.
Mm.
Tell me, could you talk to me a little bit about those two?
Yeah, thank you. See, I'm already contemplating what I meant by the divine. Because here's one of the key ways I understand where we are collectively, and I think a lot about the evolutionary journey of humanity. And our new book, for me, is situated right in that. And I'm fascinated also by how all the wisdom traditions foresaw this time that we're in. But so one of the symptoms of this time for me very clearly, and I've seen it for a while and kind of inquired deeply into it, is that in throwing out religion collectively, legacy religion, which I think was a very needed step, it's like we also threw the baby out with the bathwater. And I see us, and in many ways myself, it's like we condemned ourselves to living within a secular ceiling. And in so doing, we kind of we are abandoned, and we abandoned such a fundamentally central part of life. So it's like we've all of us who are on some kind of path, we're having to restore, reinvent, rediscover what the sacred means, even what the divine means, because we wiped out that map. And it's nothing to do with belief. This is what's so interesting, I think, because beliefs are very problematic. People kill each other for beliefs. And I always knew this, when I was much, much younger. I knew intuitively when people said to me, "Do you believe in God?" I always knew it was a pointless question. And I just was like, and even now, it doesn't matter whether you believe or don't believe, it's not the point. It's what we experience. So in my own journey, which is, by the way, ever evolving, and in many ways more fast evolving now than ever, which I see as something about the frequency of 2026, like everything is going faster. And I come to experience more and more or at least more and more deeply, substantially more deeply, what it means to rest in the unified field, which is a field of real capital L love. And I find myself experiencing that in quite a new way. Is that the divine? I don't know. I'm not even sure about that word, but it's something very profound. And I recognize it's something all the traditions have spoken about. And I feel very blessed by that, really, really blessed. And I'm not even exactly sure how that's happened, other than by my total commitment to the path of healing and awakening. And by healing, I mean all our personal, ancestral, and collective trauma, which I've been carrying as much as anybody, and have, been continually working with and will continue to address.
There was something deeply satisfying in listening to that. Um, from your experience, could you give me a sense of a moment perhaps where a notion of the divine had nothing to do with belief?
Yeah, I think that's a lovely question, because I spent 25 years in the theatre, and most of that was researching with actors what was the most open state they could be in, kind of like the zone in sports. And because of the training I'd received from a very famous Polish man called Jerzy Grotowski, who's a kind of legend in the theatre, the path was through very intense body work and like opening every cell of the body, and particularly the pelvis. So, and there were endless experiences in the rehearsal room, for instance, of entering this kind of zone of total receptivity, like total capital E emptiness, which is at the heart of creativity, and total receptivity. And that's so far beyond belief. There's no belief in that. It's pure experience. And that happened hundreds of times. So from a young age, I was already steeped in capital E emptiness. I see that looking back. It's so interesting to look back. And so what I experience now is simply ever deeper versions of that. And it has nothing to do with belief. Nothing whatsoever. It feels like actually, I was recently at a meditation session run by a dear friend. And at the beginning, she invited us all to take the question, what dost thou seek most deeply? And what immediately came to me, it was very lovely, was the end of all seeking. I was surprised, and it meant everything to me. And so really we are talking about something completely beyond belief. What does belief mean? I believe in this, I believe in that. And for me, it's part of, my whole work is about breaking the control of linear thinking, which is so dominant, far more than I think we even realize, that we're so estranged from direct experience. And in the book, there's one chapter where I write about two of my deep immersions in non-Western traditions, and where I had experiences that were so far beyond thinking and so far in a direct experience of the world and the multidimensionality of the world, of what we call reality, that that belief really doesn't have any place there. just is.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what the experience of realizing that statement of the end of seeking? Can you describe what your response was to that coming up?
Well, in many ways, it's something I only touch quite recently, because it is a place of resting, real deep, deep resting, where there is nothing anymore to get or prove, or yeah, it's a place of complete resting in unity and in love, in capital L love, or what I sometimes call the one heart. And it's not, and at the same time, from there, I'm as motivated and as drawn to act in the world, even more than ever before, actually. But it comes with no effort and no stress, almost like a kind of blazing fire. and more and more with a kind of unshakability. And therefore, because I work in the corporate world, so I'm bringing something very radical, and I find myself speaking it with just more and more clarity, and not in any way minding what comes back. But anyway, because I find myself speaking with more and more fierceness and more love. So it's more and more well received. There's very little pushback in a way, because we all know deep down, we know we're in exile. That's a word I use a lot. I find it a powerful word. Everyone knows when it's presented, and I have ways of languaging it that just make such simple sense to people. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
You totally are. This is this is where I like to reside. So this is the it's funny that when you said the word exile there, it just tripped almost a laugh in me or something, because it feels so um, on the money, if you know what I mean, or on point. And interestingly enough, when you describe that experience of like resting, it in the context which you're describing it, there's actually an emotion in my eyes. It's funny, just around the word of resting, like it gives such I think, a clear sense of just when you think of exile and resting, and just how resting is almost a radical word nowadays.
It
I
really
feel
is.
are tired, but there's something really beautiful, and you touched on in the book too, around the alignment of energy and words, and
Yeah.
just this the sense here you're talking about feeling unshakable, and this blaze of fire. I'm just really curious for you, just the significance of that, the word and energy, and perhaps maybe
Mm,
how it's missing somewhat.
thank you, Mark. Yeah, it's a very important topic, because part of our exile, part of what I call our amnesia, because I think we're literally in a collective amnesia, and because the mind is so dominant, is that a lot of time people speak in what I call narrative. So there is something happening here, and then we speak from out here. So there's not a connection to energy or experience. And because everyone does that, we normalized it. And once you see it, it just creates a total fog and a total lack of connection. So it's like if you ask a lot of adults, tell me how you're feeling right now, you get all this narrative and analysis and interpretation and concept. And it's like, sorry, what are you actually feeling? So, in my experience, and it's a very, very big part of what I train coaches in. Because when word and energy align, something very, very significant happens inside us. There's a movement of energy. We could say it's a coherence of left and right brain. And it's like in children. I was taught this quite a while ago. Like, let's say a 5-year-old is having a tantrum, and you say to them, are you sad? No. Are you angry? No. Are you disappointed? Yeah. And that's a beautiful example of the power of word and energy, that we settle inside when word and energy are one, and we go deeper and deeper and deeper. And we rediscover the extraordinary power of language and the precision. One of my great teachers, Thomas Hubel, used to always say, precision is love. To give you an example from a while back, I was doing a session for Coaches Rising, I think. So many, about 400 people online. And I was working with one woman, and she said, I'm feeling a lot of grief right now. And because I can be very tuned in to what people are feeling, I said, I think what you're really feeling more is sorrow. Yeah. That's the precision of language. It's incredible. And we're so far away from that. We speak in this abstract way, and we use words that sound like they have a lot of meaning, but they have no energy unless they're connected to what's really, really happening. There's a whole chapter in the book about that. Because we know, throughout history, the great orators, they could move whole communities. But it's not the word, it's the word connected to the energy.
As you're speaking, it feels like the correlate, almost the similarities between it of just hearing the right note being played.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Beautiful. Yes. Yeah.
Were you just curious as to this initial inquiry, or part of the initial inquiry that you mentioned, of what does it mean to be fully human? When do you sense that started to form more clearly as a question that you were exploring?
I want to come back to the rest word as well. So let's
Yeah.
come back to that, because I think it's very important. So my life really changed age 16 in a kind of totally unexpected way. I was a school kid in London and highly committed to sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it was an amazing time in London for all of those. And one school holiday, a friend of mine told me he was going to visit his grandmother, who lived in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery in Scotland, which was then small. It had been started by Chogyam Trungpa, who became quite a well-known figure. And did I want to go? And we kind of went, why not? Not with any very serious intention at all. And it was, lots of meditating and chanting. And anyway, halfway through our time there, someone gave me a very classic Buddhist text to read. And I remember I was sitting on my bed in our room reading it. And it was literally, I think it was almost in a moment, a whole curtain opened. And I suddenly knew exactly what this text was all about. And it really was a life-changing moment, because there was no way of unseeing that. And it was clear to me that had to be the center of my inquiry into life. And, it went through many, many phases. And at that time, there wasn't the kind of literature around now that there is. But I found my way to things like Alan Watts, people like Alan Watts, and also Carlos Castaneda became a kind of beacon. And we used to wait, the next Castaneda book from America. It was like, wow. And then I had particular friend, and we became so committed to exploration of altered states. And we would do crazy stuff together. And we'd go to the top of a mountain in Wales, and very steep, and we'd run down at full speed. I'd probably kill myself now to get into an altered state. I mean, we were like devotees. And then I discovered this incredible teacher in the theatre world who was also using theatre to explore very altered states. And I went to Poland to study with him, and then I brought his work back, and etc., etc. But basically, from the age of 16, my course was set, I would say. But it took me a long, long time. I would say that for many, many years, I was in the tendency to bypass. I didn't understand trauma. I didn't understand that I needed to really look into my biography. I just knew that I kept experiencing these very high states, and why couldn't I live like that all the time? So there would be high, crash, high, crash. So it was only at a certain point that I began to realize that, okay, there's a whole other part of life that needs really looking into, which is why I now speak so clearly about awakening and healing. And I see that the healing part is the one that's often the most bypassed, particularly in the spiritual world. And it's useless without that. And I understand even metaphysically now that being fully human, as I understand it, and even as people like Jung said, is not about going up to the light. It's about bringing the light down. And for that, we have to go into the darkest corners of our unconscious. And I train people to do that. And it's an amazing process and very challenging. And there's a chapter in the book about the difference between wellness and transformation, because wellness is a $8 trillion industry. And it's good, it's fine, it's great, but it's not the same as transformation. In a way, wellness is all about how do I, as identity, feel better. Transformation is an explosion of the I identity. And far fewer people will engage that, and that's just how it is. But our argument in the book is that senior leaders have to engage transformation now. At this time, more than ever, wellness is not nearly enough.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the way in which you sense you're showing up, even in corporate spaces, with a kind of sense of it being unwavering or feels very direct? And even just there, as you're saying, we don't need wellness, wellness isn't what we need right now, it's transformation. And the time that we find ourselves in. Can you give me a little sense of how those things are kind of coalescing?
Well, first of all, everything, as we know, everything comes from our transmission. So how I show up with a corporate audience, the foundation of that is what my transmission is. Like anyone, every leader is transmitting constantly. We all are transmitting constantly. So the key question is, what are we transmitting? I mean, that is the key topic, really. And to what degree are we? I mean, I've always, because of all the body work I've done, really a lot. So I'm very, very grounded. And that's already unusual. People are not used to seeing that. And I talk a bit slower than normal, which people are also not used to. It's not a technique, it's just natural. No, I don't want to, I neither want to talk like that or hear that. So, but then I have, I do have very simple, persuasive ways of, first of all, appealing to the cognitive side of people. And it's not rocket science. Even if I will often ask a corporate group, what it feels like to be in flow, because that's a widely recognized word. And everyone says, yeah, I know what that feels like. And then I would say, so how does it feel? And we get the language: connected, energized, creative, clearer, etc., etc. And then I would ask, so what percentage of each day on average do you live in flow? And kind of heads drop a bit. And it's 5%, 10%. And then I'm like, so do you see what we've normalized? Do you see that that's at the core of our culture? And what does it mean to not be in flow? And what it means that you're thinking, etc., etc. So there are very few people who can't follow that, if you see what I mean. And then there are other ways of mapping this, doing and being. And, I have very simple maps. I'm not a big mapper in that way, but just enough that the cognitive mind says, okay, I know what you're talking about. So once there's a cognitive agreement enough, then we can begin the experiential work. Because typically, particularly at a big business school where I teach, and I often have like 35 to 40 global leaders for 2.5 days. And the attitude at the beginning, explicitly or implicitly, is we don't do vulnerability. No. It's not business-like, it's not needed, etc., etc. So I meet that. So first we get a cognitive agreement, but that's also coming with transmission. So I know I'm speaking to their minds, but I also know they're receiving a transmission. It's just how it is. And then we little by little go into vulnerability, and it just takes a bit of time. But often by day 2, I get them writing in a very personal way. And we do, first of all, we also do some deep somatic work, simple somatic work, at the end of which people are often in a like, wow, this is a very new experience. And I'm not really thinking very much. Wow. So that's already one gate that opens. And then we talk about that. We talk about the implication of that. We talk about neuroscience, brainwave frequency. So it's always building the map together. But the key the key breakthrough is almost always on the emotional level, because that's where we're the most afraid. So through writing and then sharing, that's often when the whole kind of, sometimes the floodgates open, really. And people do start becoming very emotional together. And then they're in awe, first of all, of how connected they feel to each other. They're also hugely relieved to see that they're not the only ones who are carrying fear and hurt, and that it's actually universal. And then there's often a certain point, because it does get very emotional and the whole kind of field changes. And then if people have been in groups of 5 or 6, and I say, so if you were strangers, but if you were a corporate team, do you think you'd be working better for having gone through this emotional opening? And the answer is obviously yes. So, the point is kind of made bit by bit. And even speaking about ancestral trauma to people, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's not like complicated. Everyone knows that their parents or grandparents went through difficult experiences which were not processed, and so on and so forth. And then there's the really kind of big rewrite that there is no such thing as positive or negative emotion. That's a big rewrite. And no emotion needs to be fixed. It just needs to be felt. That's a huge rewrite. And so on and so forth. So I'll just give you some sense of the journey, meditate as well. We meditate. And so then I can give a whole teaching about what I call the white page, and this beautiful image from the traditions of how when you open the page of a book, you have all the black letters and there's a white page. And we're fixated on the black letters. And people are kind of fascinated by that because they've all had some taste of the white page. And then we know that artists live in the white page. Whether it's Beethoven saying he used to walk in the woods and he would start hearing music, or someone like Carlos Santana saying, I turn off the TV, I turn off the radio, I sit quietly and I start to hear a melody. So it's always located in material that people can understand. It's not like abstract.
For you, then, given that as the foundation of what you're doing, just with regards to even with the book Leading in Chaos, but just your own how you see the world at this point in time, do you get a sense that it's a moment where more urgency is not necessarily urgency, but there's more of a firmness to addressing some of these things in corporate spaces, or just as humans in general? Like, do you sense that we're coming to a moment where this is becoming just increasingly more important?
I think there's no doubt about that. I don't think we're coming to it. I think we're in it. And that's why I'm so fascinated by what the traditions said. The humanity would arrive at this junction point at which things would get darker and darker as they are. We're in a kind of systemic collapse, or what Joanna Macy called the great unraveling. I mean, it's happening. It's not coming, it's happening. And interestingly, you see many leaders that Amy and I meet are saying in their own way, the old playbooks are not quite working, which is fantastic. Because so long as they were kind of working, people could say, well, it's all right. But people are openly saying they're not working. And yes, I think we're in a huge urgency and a time of immense challenge and incredible possibilities. What I also see, Mark, is that, and I hear this again from widely, that a lot of leaders are finding it much more possible to say things like, I'm so lonely. I feel so isolated. I'm so difficult. And I do see also that my experience since we began 2026 is that there's so much happening in the energetic world, and that more portals are open now. And I see people going through even what look like initiations quicker and deeper now. So that's to me also part of the urgency of the time.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Because you're putting words to a feeling or a sense that I've had around this year specifically.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I can remember we had a little dinner party here on New Year's Eve. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, something really different is coming in now. And these are things that are difficult to articulate. Although there have been many people in the astrological world, in the channeling world, who have very clearly said 2026 is going to be a big, big year. My sense, it's very hard to articulate it, but I would say that just at the same time as there is systemic collapse out in the world, it feels as though there's systemic collapse internally for a lot of people in a very positive way, meaning portals are more open now that people can go through. And I also have an intuitive sense, even for myself. I would say my whole experience of reality is changing fast. And I have an intuitive sense that in 9 months' time, it's going to be something I can't even imagine
That
now. And,
that resonates unbelievably, unbelievably well with me too.
isn't it interesting? I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
So I'm met with this. I'm met with a few things. Yes, I can feel some despair, obviously, for some of the things that are happening in the world.
Of course.
I also feel an immense possibility of energetic movement, I would say. And
Right.
further to that, I actually just wrote something recently just around the sense of my world feels there's a bewildering sense of the world right now in terms of what I sense to be real or not. And I don't mean that in a distant or disembodied way.
Mm.
I feel it's almost in the refuge that either presence or a present moment offers me, or even just in my response to what otherwise might be like could be considered as an overwhelming situation. It
Mm.
feels quite calm.
Right.
And so there's just this energy at the moment that I don't know what that means, but it feels meaningful or important.
Amazing. Yeah, I can strongly relate to what you're saying. It's like we're being recoded. That's one way I think of it. And then also because of the coaching work I do and the way I'm training coaches, which is very different to normal coaching, I see more and more what it means, how deeply programmed we are. From the word go, we come into a collective program at the very core of which is identity as separate. It's becoming clear. I'd known that intellectually for a long time, but the reality of that is becoming clearer and clearer. How deep that is. And I really see in myself and in the people I work with that program is up for getting recoded now. And that's why I say, who knows how I'll be feeling in 9 months' time as that continues to be recoded. Because it's so at the core of everything. And when we rest in the field, as I would call it, in the unitive field, it gives a quite different perspective on identity. A year and a half ago, I had a very strong experience with a spiritual teacher, amazing man in London. We had 2 days, 1-to-1. And he initiates, it's very clear, it's part of his work is initiating. And after the first day, I crawled home. I could hardly move. It was incredible. But in the days after the second day, I was in London. And it was like a whole new perception opened up because I suddenly saw everyone's bubble. I saw that everyone was walking around in this bubble of identity. And from within that bubble, that's all there is. And it was no judgment. It was more like, wow. So I see the setup. It's like, this is the whole setup of what we've come to experience as reality. And then obviously that kind of faded in a way, as that kind of high perception does. And now it's back quite full time. And it's amazing to see that, the difference between when we're in the unitive field as opposed to when we're in identity. And why we need to keep working on identity at all the trauma parts in particular, because they are what keeps the identity bubble locked. And that's why this notion of we have to feel everything is so crucial, because whichever part of us we truly feel that's been excluded starts to melt. I see that more clearly now. So the hard edges of identity, which are based on excluding so much emotional material, as that emotional material can be contacted and it goes very, very deep and really felt, that's how the identity starts to kind of re-enter the river, let's say. And I've been thinking a lot about that. I think it was from the 60s and very much kind of West Coast America phrase, you have to be a somebody before you can be a nobody. It just came to me a few weeks ago. So I've really been sitting with what that really means. And the fact that we all became a somebody, and we have to really work deeply with that somebody, and then we begin to melt into being a nobody. Because being in the unitive field has that feeling of I'm much less of a somebody. It's getting a bit abstract, but I know you know what I'm talking about.
Ram Dass is always someone I always enjoy listening to, and I always just hear
Yeah,
I hear you say that somebody training, but I find it there's something kind of brilliant to the idea that some of the words that we come to that I think are incredibly helpful, and I would like to come back to resting as well,
yes,
just to
good,
kind
good. Thank you for remembering.
of like the word nobody is so confronting.
It is.
Then also surrender would be so confronting,
Yes, yes,
and resting these
yes.
days feels so confronting to the frenetic kind of movement of life for so many. So I
Right.
just find it so interesting that those it feels almost like it's too perfectly written that that these are the things that we're exploring in ways.
Yes.
I'd
Yeah.
love to hear some of the thoughts that came to you previously just around the sense of rest.
Yeah. It's a really big one because what became clear to me recently, also through some teaching that I was exposed to, is that we actually have no idea until we feel it how deeply ingrained in our nervous system is the sense of life as effort and even life as kind of struggle. It's so deeply programmed. So when we speak of rest, we're not speaking about sleeping. We're speaking about touching an inner experience where that it's like that core effort has melted. It's quite new for me to even feel that. I think I felt it at moments, but it's quite new for that to be more of a baseline. Quite new. And from there, I can also, of course, therefore see how deep is the programming about life as effort. And when I work with people, I feel it right in their core. It's literally in our nervous system, and we inherited it. It's been like that for generations.
Such a beautiful observation.
Say again?
Such a beautiful observation.
Because I've had in my life for a long time, life as effort. Long time. but I didn't realize how deep it went. Always trying to get somewhere, always trying to prove something, always trying to, for something. That's why, what dost thou seek? The end of all seeking.
When we started with many moons ago, when we started with the question of what to be human, what does it mean to be human in contact with the divine, and then just even around the sense of what the potential of people is. Where does your mind go in with regards to that question? Maybe even in the context of some of what we've been speaking about.
Well, one thing I understand feelingly more and more clearly is that the fundamental break we all experienced, most probably very early in life, was a break from the flow of love. It's very, very clear to me, in myself and in everyone. So, in a way, the whole journey is a return to love, because love is the core essence of life. So, and for that to occur, part of that we have to face all the ways our heart got wounded. There's no other way. We can't go around that. But as we do that, there is this, and this happens in groups. I have a kind of advanced group as well. It's extraordinary, the field we enter together, which feels like what I sometimes call the one heart. It's a field of such total love and total inclusion of everything, everything. So I think that's the ultimate journey we're on, the return to love. And we could not be further away from it in many instances. And like you, I'm sure sometimes world events, I just sit and sob. And I'm happy for that. I mean, I'm happy that my heart breaks in that way. I think that's needed, by the way. So it doesn't work to just push it all away. I mean, it may be needed for some people; they can't take it on board. But I think we need all we need to be able to expand our hearts so that we can face the pain and the horror and feel it.
Absolutely, because I think I know it's something else that you write about in the book around on feeling alive. But there's
Mm.
so many of the things that I think we've been touching on, even when you talk about that bubble, even the sense of identity, the avoidance of so many things, the not acknowledging of whether it's ancestral, whether it's keeping ourselves at a distance from
Mm.
direct experience, like so much of it. And as you said earlier, even just the how little of life that how small we've reduced this life to be
Exactly.
the kind of experience from, like it really is
Yes,
remarkable.
it is.
and and love seems to be, which is so, it's amazing that we've made something almost trivial about love, and just, and yet we're all so acutely aware of. Now I would dispute whether some of what we experience is love or infatuation or attachment,
That
but
small L love.
yeah, but there's definitely still moments that I think we're just so receptive to as humans
Yeah,
of the really considerable force of love. And so I
right.
find it kind of remarkable how much love is left out of ideas of what future we might build together. Do you know, or
Oh,
experience right?
it's amazing that you say that. Yeah, absolutely. Such a true thing you're saying. Yeah. Yes.
Just there's something in terms of, you used the word and it was in relation to your training, and I'm sure it's also to do with, in theater training, but also in terms of embodiment. Could you talk to me a little bit about receptivity and maybe ways in which we're
Mm.
ignoring the significance of that.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful question. So, what immediately comes to mind is that often, certainly in the corporate sector, but not only, a really big threshold we have to cross is this obsession with being in control, which obviously sits on pure fear. Because to be in receptivity, in true receptivity, which is what all artists know, and many scientists, by the way, we have to be willing to be in total unknowing. There's nothing to know. There is just I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Let something come or not come. I'm here. And there's nothing in this moment I know. And for me, because of my work in the arts, that is a very, very comfortable place to be. In fact, I love it almost more than anything else. But for many, the great majority of people, it's very scary that because there's no more control. So that's a big thing we have to face. You use the word surrender. We have to surrender the need to be in control. But usually the only way that happens is by feeling the fear that arises, really feeling the fear. And then people just relax into being, and it actually feels quite delicious. And what I see in corporate teams is that that's exactly when incredible new ideas start to arrive, obviously. We even say in English, the idea came to me. So our language already informs us that I don't do new ideas. They do me. So, the whole idea that I have to learn to be creative and here are the techniques. No, 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 no. We need to actually throw all of that out and see what it means to rest more in capital E emptiness as the most fertile space of all. And when teams can do that, and it's a huge thing, for all the reasons we know, that's when amazing innovation begins. And suddenly ideas come that, it's like a grace that comes. Very, very blessed space, which is exactly what happens in the creative world. When you go and see a top jazz group, that's happening live. And that's why it's such a strong experience, because the music is being created. Obviously, they have the parameters, but then it's newly created every performance. And by the way, that's true in theatre, because if you talk to any actor, they will tell you that in the best performance, even the 100th time they've done the performance, they will feel as though they're saying the words for the first time. That's receptivity. I'm totally open now. There's no past. That's a radical different way of being in the world. It's a radically different way of being in the world. And it's also, because I also sometimes ask people, how much wonder do you experience in your life? And it's very little, because if we're constantly doing and controlling, there's no wonder. Wonder is almost every experience is new. New. It can't be new if I'm constantly imposing my mind on the world.
There's a lovely kind of poignancy and optimism or sense of energy to what you're pointing to, both in what's so apparent is what is absent, and
Mm,
yet what is so simple in ways, and therefore an opportunity for us as people. And there's words you've touched on during the course of this conversation, like whether it's an openness or love or receptivity or emptiness,
mm,
this sense of a transmission, and also even realizing the significance of what's embedded within us from our from our programming. And once we become have an awareness of that, or we become more in tune even with the emotional fallout sometimes, or repression that we may need to go through as well, there's a beautiful kind of, as you do with the book as well, with Amy, who we've interviewed here as well, obviously,
Yes.
there's a beautiful kind of mapping of the terrain in this conversation too, and both like that appeals to the mind, but also just totally appeals to the heart, body, and soul as well. So I'm really intrigued, Nicholas, to ask you the question of what is a good life for you.
It's being more and more aligned with the one heart.
Don't think there's any need to add anything further to that. Nicholas, this has been a total joy speaking with you. I'm so grateful for you joining us on the What is a Good Life podcast. I also wish you all the best with this stunningly beautiful book, Leading in Chaos, with Amy Elizabeth Fox as well.
Thank you, Mark. I was going to use exactly the same words. Such a joy to be with you. And thank you. Thank you.